come over right now and pick up the old woman we ejected from our house because we want nothing to do with her. About a month after my father's funeral, Jackson called unexpectedly. He had kicked my mother out and demanded that I take care of her from now on. I was stunned, unable to immediately grasp the situation. Are you kidding? You didn't actually kick my mom out of the house. Come see for yourself, I exclaimed, bewildered. Oh, and I let her take Dad's memorial tablet, Jackson added casually. I was taken aback. Why would you do something so heartless? Mom's just a burden now that we can't get Dad's inheritance. I have no use for Mom, Jackson retorted callously. She's just a poor burden, isn't she? I was shocked. It turned out that my late father had left behind debts, and after settling them, there was no inheritance left. Worse still, Jackson and his wife had been living in the family home all this time. It was outrageous. It's getting dark soon. If you don't come to pick her up, Mom will be sleeping on the streets, Jackson warned. How could you be so cruel? I'll never forgive you for this, Jackson, I shouted, but he hung up without a word. Subsequent calls went unanswered. When I finally reached my mother, she confirmed everything Jackson had said. Angry and worried, I had no choice but to drive over to where she was. I am Lily, a 27-year-old woman in a hurry. 3 years ago, I married Mason, who is the same age as me, and we've been living together since. At the beginning of our marriage, we lived with my parents in the family home. But 2 years ago, Jackson and his wife abruptly moved in, claiming our presence made the place crowded. My older brother Jackson, 8 years my senior, has always been selfish, but his marriage seems to have amplified that trait. Our family home, where I was born and raised, is a spacious mansion inherited from my grandfather with extensive land. There should be no discomfort in living together. I was not satisfied with the situation and argued with Jackson, but my husband, who hates conflicts, urged us to leave. Around that time, my father was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, which had already significantly worsened. I wanted to spend his last moments with him, but that didn't happen. The disease consumed my father rapidly, and he passed away a month ago. My heart ached, knowing that my mother must be in much more pain than I was to have my own brother treat us this way amidst all the fresh sorrow. It was pitiful. What would happen next was truly shocking. An hour later, when we arrived at our family home, my mom was sitting desolate on a suitcase in the garden. The front door was locked. Jackson, she said, had taken her keys, using my set of keys. I opened the door and entered with my mom. Jackson and Olivia were sprawled on the sofa, nonchalantly watching TV. Is this some kind of joke? I demanded. How did you get in? I used my key to open the front door. Isn't it obvious? Jackson replied dismissively. Slipped my mind. Leave your key, take the old lady, and go. This isn't funny. How can you be watching TV after kicking your own mother out of the house? I retorted. Besides, if the house remained even after Dad's debts were paid off, Mom has a right to live here. Huh? What are you talking about? Jackson scoffed. Infuriated by his dismissive attitude, I stood in front of the TV. Mom has a right to inherit this house. If you can't live with her, you should be the one to leave, I insisted. Shut up. This house is mine. Dad gave it to me when he was alive, Jackson snapped back. Don't act smart without knowing anything. What do you mean? There's no way Dad gave this house to you before he died, I countered. Mom also looked puzzled, shaking her head in disbelief. Jackson smirked and got up from the sofa, bringing out an envelope from a room in the back. Look at this. What's this? I asked, taking the envelope. Inside were documents proving the inheritance prepared by a judicial scribe, along with his real estate ownership certificate. He said that the property had been transferred to his name a month before Dad passed away, Jackson announced triumphantly. Mom and I were shocked as we looked at the documents. Why would Dad do something like this? I murmured, feeling a mix of confusion and betrayal. Asking a departed person didn't yield an answer. I sighed, looking at his picture. Why would Dad hand over the house to Jackson without discussing it with Mom? Jackson simply shrugged, a smug grin on his face. I'm his favorite, of course, Jackson boasted. I told him that Mom would take the house once he passed away, so he gave it to me while he was still alive. That can't be. I can't believe it. Open your eyes and face the reality, I exclaimed in disbelief. No matter how many times we checked the document, the property was in Jackson's name. All this just for a house, my mom muttered in disbelief. Is there no other inheritance? Nothing left for Mom. Be glad that the debts are cleared, Jackson retorted. This can't be real. You're not just worrying about Mom. You realize there's no inheritance for you either, right? The bank card he handed over contained only a few dollars. I wasn't after Dad's inheritance, but it was a shock to learn that he had left me nothing. This is too cruel, I muttered, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. To add insult to injury, Olivia was laughing heartily, seeing our dejection. Now get lost, you poor people. You have no business here, she sneered. Jackson and Olivia forcibly drove us out of the house. Ouch, that hurts, Mom cried out as she fell and scraped her palm when they pushed us out. Blood seeped from the wound as I wrapped her hand in my handkerchief. Tears of frustration welled up and fell. Seeing me like this, my mother gently wiped my tears, her eyes filled with sorrow as well. Mom, our place is small, but come stay with us. But I don't want to impose on Mason. I'll find somewhere else to stay, Mom protested. Don't worry, I just can't leave you like this. I'm going to call Mason right now. Just wait, I said, wiping my tears. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed my husband. From the other end of the line, I heard Mason's voice. Hello, Mason. I apologize for calling out of the blue, but my mom has been kicked out of her house, I explained to my surprised husband. He hummed in understanding, though he seemed a bit hesitant. I held my breath, waiting for Mason's response. Our apartment is pretty cramped compared to Mom's house. It might not be the most comfortable, I cautioned. Yeah, our place is tiny, but I don't mind. Bring your mom over. We've had times where we were taken care of at home too. In times of trouble, we should help each other out, Mason responded warmly. Thank you so much, I replied gratefully. My husband is a kind man with a big heart. He could never leave someone in need. Quickly, we took Mom to our apartment, and from that day on, we lived together. However, living with 3 people in our small apartment was certainly cramped. We didn't have enough savings to buy a house yet, but moving to a slightly larger place might be good. I feel bad for your mom in this small space, Mason admitted as we searched for properties on the computer. After a while, my mom's cell phone rang. She hung up and said something we never could have imagined. Why don't we live in my Highlands condominium? She suggested. Wait, what Highlands condominium? I asked, taken aback. My mother began to explain, much to our surprise. Apparently, my grandfather, who was a wealthy man, was quite a spendthrift and spent all the money he made in a day. In order to deal with his constant borrowing, my grandmother had no choice but to sell off their farmland to make ends meet. According to my mom, my father was also a big spender, but we didn't have any assets other than the house we lived in. So, I was really worried about our future. That's why I invested in real estate with the money. I was taken aback when my mom revealed that in addition to the Highland condominium, she was also managing an apartment building and had made a significant amount of money from her real estate investments. My husband and I were absolutely stunned. I can't even comprehend this. It's too amazing, I murmured. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Anyway, I just got a call from the management company that there's a vacancy in the Highland condominium. We can move in next month. What do you think? Mom asked. There was no reason to refuse such a generous offer, especially since the Highland condominium had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, and a kitchen, located just a 5-minute walk from the station. It was much more comfortable than our current situation. Thank you, Mom, but we may only be able to pay as much rent as we are for the apartment, I said, feeling hesitant. You don't need to worry about that. We have to do this properly, even if we're family, Mom insisted. Oh, I need to tell the landlord that we're moving out. As we beamed with joy, time flew by as we busied ourselves preparing to move into our new home. Before we knew it, 2 months had passed and we were living in the Highland condominium. One day, as I was about to head out for some shopping, I was taken aback when the Jackson couple suddenly appeared in front of the condominium entrance. Why are you, a pauper, living in the Highland condominium? Did you hit the jackpot or something? They sneered. Of course not. Highlands condominium has always belonged to my mom, I replied calmly. Jackson and Olivia were both taken aback. What? They exclaimed in unison, looking at the towering condominium in disbelief. Their confused and goofy expressions were priceless, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Jackson's face flushed red with anger. That wretched woman. I can't believe she was hiding this from us while pretending to be poor, he seethed. My mom never said she was poor. You just assumed it, Jackson. Plus, she inherited a large house. What's wrong with that? I retorted. That's not the point. Don't yell here. It's disrespectful to the other residents. Ignoring his outburst, I continued. Besides, how did you know I was here? Jackson said that when he couldn't reach my mother, he tracked her down using her mobile phone's location. Olivia explained. Why are you trying to contact Mom now after kicking her out? I bet it's something nasty again, I accused. Regardless, I insisted on seeing my mother. Let me in now. You must be joking. If you hurt Mom again, I couldn't bear it. If you have something to say, you can tell me, I added firmly. But the Jackson couple kept insisting on seeing my mother without revealing why. They seemed rather flustered. Weren't you living comfortably in your huge family house, just the two of you? I pressed. It's none of your business, Jackson snapped. Fine, if you don't want to tell me, that's okay. I have to go now. Bye, I said, trying to walk past them. Suddenly, Jackson grabbed my arm tightly. Ouch. Let me go, I exclaimed. Just call Mom, he demanded. Absolutely not. I'll call the police, I threatened. But Jackson scoffed at me. There's no way the police would come for a simple family argument. Even if they did, there's no way you could sue me for just grabbing your arm. I had to admit he had a point. Calling the police over something so minor might not only be futile but also disruptive to others. Feeling bad, I ended up not saying anything. Fine, I'll tell my mom, but only if you tell me why you're here. I relented. Jackson and Olivia hesitated before Jackson spoke up. The utility bills for that house are ridiculous. Just for the AC, the electric bill is $500. This is no joke. Their old traditional style house had more than 8 rooms, so it was no surprise that utility costs were high. But even so, a $500 electricity bill seemed a little steep, especially considering it was a particularly hot summer. I thought you would have known that from the start. How would we have known? Mom used to pay the bills. Jackson scratched his head frantically while Olivia fumed. Do you know the property tax for that house is $5,000 a year? Olivia added, exasperated. What? I can't believe you didn't know. Why would an old house like that cost so much? How are we supposed to pay that? Our house is old and has a large yard, so it's only natural that it would cost a lot to maintain, I pointed out. And you know, apparently it costs more in taxes to give away property while you're alive than after you pass away. This is going to be tough going forward. Wait, is that true? Jackson asked incredulously. Seeing the stunned expressions on the Jacksons' faces, I explained that this was all true information I had heard from my mom. The color drained from the Jacksons' faces. Olivia burst out in anger. It's your fault for not doing your homework. They started fighting right in front of me. After all the trouble we went through to get Dad to change the name on the house. This is too much, Jackson complained. That's what you get for doing something so underhanded, Olivia retorted. But even Dad said clearly that it would be better to give it to me than to your mom. I can't believe it, I muttered, shocked into silence as I realized that my father had disregarded my mom and me. Seizing the moment, Jackson made an outrageous request. You can have the house. Let's exchange it for this Highlands condominium, he proposed. What are you talking about? This isn't mine. It belongs to Mom. Please talk to Mom for me. I beg you. I promise to pass on your message. Nothing more, I pleaded. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jackson snapped, his tone incredulous. Feeling ridiculous for even engaging with them, I gave up on shopping and started to head back into the Highlands condominium through the entrance. But the Jacksons tried to follow me, their audacity leaving me speechless. I'll sue you for trespassing, I threatened. You just told us that wouldn't be a legal issue, Olivia countered. It seemed like they wouldn't get the message until they suffered a real consequence. Exasperated, I called out to the management office next to the entrance. Excuse me, could you please call security? Someone who's not a resident of the Highlands condominium is trying to force their way in, I explained. The security guard, who was on standby 24/7, came running immediately. With the large security guard in front of them, the Jacksons were startled. I warned them once again to avoid the same thing happening in the future. I didn't call the police just now because you only grabbed my arm. But if you try to use force or enter the Highlands condominium again, I will really call the police, okay? I cautioned. We beg you, don't do that. If I even catch a glimpse of you, I'll report it. So go back to your mansion that you got from Dad. Got it? I added firmly. Apparently scared of the police, the Jacksons hastily retreated. I went back to my apartment and told my mother about the exchange with the Jacksons. But why did Dad let Jackson inherit the house? I wondered, feeling downcast. Mom smiled. Dad must have known what he was doing. When Dad let Jackson and her inherit the house, he didn't want to burden me or you, Lily. Even though Dad was indifferent about money, he cared for me a lot. Of course, he always said he loved you, Lily, so much. I was overjoyed to hear that my father felt that way about me. When my mom heard about the inheritance from Jackson, she muttered, "Are you going this far?" Because she realized that he had given a severe punishment to Jackson, who was always self-centered. "You knew how Dad felt, Mom?" I asked. "Of course, dear. We've been together for 38 years. I know what he's thinking without him saying a word. Besides, Jackson never took care of Dad when he was sick," Mom explained. I was under the impression that the Jacksons were looking after my father. However, it turns out they hardly ever visited him, not at home and barely in the hospital. When I visited my dad, he would often tell me, "Jackson comes to see me, and you have your job to attend to, Lily. There's no need for you to go out of your way." I took his words to heart, not realizing that it was a gentle lie meant to ease my worries. I had it all wrong about Dad. I feel awful. I want to apologize. "Don't fret, Lily. Your feelings are reaching Dad in heaven. The ones who should worry are the Jacksons. Who these days would buy a big, high-maintenance house like that? I bet they'll struggle to find a buyer," Mom reassured me. The truth in my mom's previously mischievous, gleeful words became evident after a while. The Jacksons, unable to maintain the house on their own, put it up for sale, but couldn't find a buyer. They continued to live in it even a year later. In the midst of all this, Olivia accidentally started a grease fire while cooking chicken in the house. It quickly burned down, and since they didn't have money for fire insurance, their life is going to get even tougher. "Well, while I understand their predicament, it doesn't concern me," I remarked. Apparently, the Jacksons are now camping out in the burned-down remains of their house. Living in the Highlands condominium is absolutely fantastic, and I can only feel gratitude toward my mother. I've been paying my mom rent every month, but it seems she's been saving it all to ensure we won't face hardship in the future. Every day is filled with peace and happiness as I live with my incredible mother and kind husband. As I visited my father's grave, I vowed to him that I would continue to repay my mother's kindness.